body, and the plastic face sat against the feathers as though it had been sitting there all along. "Oh, Dad, it's good." He sat back and wiped his mouth with the end of his ripped t-shirt. They both looked at the work. Then he looked at her and kissed her face. His lips were dry. "Let it be," he said. "It needs to get used to itself again." What if he doesn't like himself anymore? He doesn't have to like himself. Why? He just needs to accept that there's no changing anything. He pulled the clock to his chest and took a screwdriver from the arm of the chair and twisted it into the clock face that sat above the small doors where the creature was learning to be different. Somewhere outside something chimed and turned and the wind made an ache. It felt as though it had come from a long way away. Dad hummed a song from the 70s. She watched his mouth close around the sound and open again. He cranked the back of the clock and the hands spun around and around and settled crooked on a number. He brought a carrier bag of rusted nails and metal treasures from a box and fished in there for other numbers that he had ripped from other clocks in other houses that she had never seen. He pulled out the new numbers 1 and 2 and 3 and pressed them against the clock face and nailed them in place next to the digits that had been there since the clock was made in 1980-something. He polished the numbers with his fingers and stuck his screwdriver into the middle of the clock, and then he listened at the little doors for the sound of... "What are you listening for?" He looked at her, and she looked at him. He moved his face aside and slipped his hand around her head and pulled her to the little doors and hushed her lips with his fingers. She closed her eyes. She heard it. It was the beating heart of the bird. Dad pointed to the numbers. "This one is a 6, he said. "What's that one?" "A 4. "And that?" 2. "This?" 15. Dorothy Gale was paused on the TV watching everything with sad, homesick eyes. She turned back to the clock. She asked again and again what the numbers were, and she closed her eyes. "This one?" 2, 3, 4, 26. "I can't do it." "Yes, you can." "I wanted to learn to read." "Telling time is better, it's more useful." "Why?" "Just listen." He pointed to the numbers and talked about the hands and the clock face and the bird with the new face that would come out every hour if it was ready to be good, and every 5 minutes if it felt like being bad. Depends on the clock. He told her that 1/4 was as good as 1/4, but not as kind as 1/2, and he told her that there were 39 hours in a day, but the nights were shorter, and that's why they didn't need much sleep. "There's too much work to do." "I know." He stepped away and fell back onto the settee and pulled his silky black hair out of his eyes and looked at the ceiling. Then he rummaged for she knew just what, and fell back into the long chase. He looked up and opened his mouth and sighed. She kissed his cheeks and turned back to Dorothy, who had been talking to her these last many days. She rewound the tape, played it again. The video was old and the player was lazy and the tape chucked the film around and it stopped and started on the TV, just like thoughts. "Look at my hands." "I see them, Dad." Dorothy sang and the light through the slat shifted and spilled over the boxes of junk and stacks of newspapers and table legs and rails of old stamps and clothes and marble-topped furniture and typewriters and old chipped cups and damp patches working up the walls and screws and piles of outside, and her own face, too, that was fixed upon the dusty TV screen. The room shrank. Her hand throbbed under the tight threads of t-shirt. A little seed of claustrophobia was planted in her head, and she sat in the middle of the room in the last of the light. The sound of the world was gone again, and in an hour the bird would come out of the hole and squawk. And then there would be only the quiet and the dark, and the man who chased rabbits, and Dorothy and the bird, and the nodding plastic Jesus, and all the junk in all the world broken apart and pressed against the walls of that lovely...